Here we go, Don C. You ready to roll? We are live. Look at there. The man is everywhere. Welcome into Inside Carolina Live Reaction. Malcolm Ziglar, Fuquay Varina safety, 4-star in-state young man commits to North Carolina. Live in the Bengals basketball arena. Don is now in the football stadium. Boy, it's been a long time since I've been over there. Last time I was there, I saw Chester McLaughlin beat up on Fuquay way back in the day. But Don looks like a hot one out there. Just sort of set the scene for us today in Fuquay.
Yeah, so well, can I get with my complaint real quick? Can I
What's
go to
the?
there?
Can you start with a
So a
complaint?
lot
Go
of
ahead.
this whole setup is because I had to find an outlet, which isn't the easiest thing in a football stadium, all because some jerk stepped on my cord during the stream. And, I mean, my computer's been on forever. And so I don't want my computer to die while it's not charging now. I don't want it to die while we are out here. So,
Well,
um,
we will get this knocked out. If it dies, it dies. To quote a Rocky thing or something like that. I think that was a familiar one. Joey Powell's in the chat. I'm sure he can let me know uh, how bad I mangled that quote. Don, Malcolm Ziglar commits to Carolina. Another in-state guy, another defensive back, a safety, Charlton Warren doing work for the Tar Heels. Just sort of break down what this commitment sort of means for North Carolina, and then we'll get into the details with Ziegler himself.
So the main thing there's a lot of elements to it because he's an in-state guy and he's a highly ranked in-state guy. I think 247 has him in easily in the top 10. And so, as for being honest, North Carolina hasn't had super success in state the past two classes, and some of that is because the classes have been down. But to get a kid who is, I think he's number 5, in state is huge. And then he's a kid who has had some success in high school. I think he had like 5 interceptions, returned or I think it was 6 interceptions, returned four touchdowns, and then like the other 2, he was tackled right at the end zone, sort of thing. Just kind of speaks to just the potential that's there for him. But you kind of match up his track and his length. I mean, he's a legit 6'2" when you see him, and he's super long. He's longer than that 6'2", which suggests. So the ceiling is certainly there for him to get even better and to be a great player for North Carolina. I mean, there's a reason why he's a 4-star ranking, because he definitely has the measurables to eventually be drafted in the NFL.
Yep, 6'2", 198-ish, and I watched him walking around a little bit before the announcement. He's a big young man. He's a lot bigger than some of these guys in high school. You see these measurements, and you're like, well, he looks to be every bit of that 6'2". Don, you mentioned the ranking, 192 or so nationally, 4-star composite, and on 24/7. I know a lot of people have been talking about 24/7 rankings on Inside Carolina. A 90
It's like they just
overall.
discovered them.
I know, really. It's like,
Well,
are
it's
we
because
doing this
247
again?
has started to kind of flip to that, and people are kind of shocked. But
Well, let's talk a little bit about Ziegler and his recruitment. Clearly in Fuquay, not very far from Chapel Hill, but just sort of what do you think sort of turned the tide for North Carolina? And then I want to ask you about the other schools that were in the mix.
yeah, I think North Carolina, whether they were the leader or not, was always the team to beat for him. And I think South Carolina definitely put up a strong battle. I didn't ask him this, but it wouldn't surprise me if he kind of gave the hint. At least some of the word around is that he basically kind of hinted at South Carolina that that's where he was going, and he definitely hinted towards North Carolina that that's where he's going also, because I think there was legitimately some it was a battle between the two schools. Notre Dame, I think in hindsight, wasn't as big of a factor as I was kind of thinking it could have been, just because of the academics and everything. I think location, proximity to home was a big deal for him. So going that far away just kind of eliminated Notre Dame, but he went out there just to see, just in case sort of situation. But I think ultimately, as I said, North Carolina was a team to beat, and some of it, and we're actually going to have some, I guess, some background on the situation with when he was 10 years ago. So I guess he was like 7 or 8 years old when his father came back from the military. The family did something with with UNC during a football game. We actually have photos of it where they did the whole like your father has a message for you, and then surprise, your dad is here sort of thing. Obviously, that just sits in with with a kid, especially at that age, haven't seen your father in a very long time. And then also I think with his mom, who had to with setting that up, dealt with Rick Steinbacher to kind of help facilitate the whole arrangement. And Rick is still at North Carolina. So, and then you'll notice, and I didn't connect it until just recently, there are photos of the family and of Malcolm with Rick. And you think, why? This is strange because Rick typically doesn't take photos with the recruits, but that's the connection. And so I think it was going to be difficult for any school to overcome such a huge advantage. But then you throw in Charlton Warren, who is a guy who has a military background, which they didn't mention, but you got to think that the family, that resonated with the family also. And then I think, like I said, the proximity played a big role too.
Certainly a comfort factor there. Question from the chat, and I don't know if it's a question you can answer, but Rick Miner asked, was the Notre Dame offer committable? We've talked about committable and non-committable offers a long time on various recruits, but Ziglar had Notre Dame up there on the podium, if my eyes did not deceive me.
Yes.
So just talk a little bit about that. You said that location and all that stuff was an issue or could have been an issue, but it's safe to say a guy ranked this highly, his offers were there and were available.
Yeah. So I think we'll never know for certain. And I'm sure if you ask Notre Dame now, they're going to say it wasn't committable. I think that the official visit kind of, official visits nowadays, especially with the unlimited official visits that are about to happen or have already happened for recruits, each school gets 56 official visits. And there's no exception. There's no waiver you can get to get more official visits from the NCAA. And so if you're going to use an official visit on a kid, there's a very good chance that you want that kid, because you're not going to get that back if you need it later on in the season. So I think I would probably side with the fact that the Notre Dame offer was definitely committable. Obviously, the South Carolina one was committable because there were some South Carolina reporters there covering the announcement, and I know that they were very interested in what he was going to do, in the weeks leading up to it.
Yeah, there was a fair amount of South Carolina folks in the Inside Carolina live chat or in the YouTube chat, which is always fun when you get other people there. Don Callahan live at Fuquay Arena High School at the football concession stand. Don, I need a hot dog and some popcorn and some Cracker
I need
Jack.
some water. There's definitely, this is not open. His coach just drove past, so I can't make any promises. This is not the setup that we had last time. But if he walks past here, I might be able to grab him. Maybe we'll get him on here for a little bit. No promises.
Snag him. And now tell me this, and somebody earlier in the chat asked, and I think it was Mark Williams asked, who was everybody that spoke early there? It looked like they had the town of Fuquay. Like I said, it's a big deal. It's a big deal for these young kids to commit to schools. And also, who all spoke? Because the microphone there was hit or miss.
Okay, so obviously the athletic director, his coach spoke. His position coach, who is not just his position coach, he's very active with helping kids with recruiting and that sort of thing. And then they had the youth program that he's part of. And as I mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned again today, this is like 5 minutes from my house. And so the Strong Center, which he played for football wise, my daughter is part of that from the basketball side. So I'm very familiar with that. And then another family that he's really close to, they spoke. His mom obviously spoke. And then, the town of Fuquay Arena had a representative who was speaking. And I think really got to understand the difference between today and yesterday. Yesterday, big city Charlotte is a completely different situation. Here, Providence Day has held, I think, 3 announcements, or yesterday's announcement was the third one that they held this year. For Fuquay, they haven't held one. I mean, the last recruit that I can remember Fuquay having was Sean Underwood, who ended up in North Carolina back in the Butch Davis days. So Fuquay, this is a big deal for Fuquay. It's a big deal not just for the school, but the town, and for the football system for the younger kids as they grow up, to have a kid like that to be able to produce that sort of kid. So this is big. It's a little bit different than what we saw yesterday.
I must laugh. Music Nut says, Don, I need water. Tommy says, if he dies, he dies. Don Callahan
I'm
live.
actually more worried about. So my computer says 25 minutes, which probably means 10.
Well, we're going to get it. If Don disappears, I can wrap the show, talk about Johnny T-shirt, and point everybody to Wednesday when we come to the noon dish. Let me ask you a couple more of these questions in the
Sure.
chat. Preston from Greensboro, a regular, of course. And folks, if you want these questions answered, ask them. I'll be glad to read most anything. Could he grow into a linebacker, or does he still project as a safety only?
Yeah,
6'2", 198. That's a Cam Chancellor type safety.
I think nowadays we're so advanced with the rankings and all that whatever he's projected, that the chances of that's what he's playing is very, very high. There's a lot more research that those who do the evaluations have gone into, and so that's not the plan whatsoever for Malcolm. In reality, he actually plays cornerback more than safety at his high school, so he's so that's, if you're looking at the spectrum of defensive players, he's on the opposite end of that when it comes to athleticism and coverage abilities and that sort of thing. So if anything, he's a guy who could play some cornerback in certain situations and move to safety. But I mean, we're dealing with high school kids, who knows how he grows up, so how he develops and all that. So yeah, it's not out of the question, but that's not the plan at all. No one's even talking about that. This is a kid who's going to come in as a safety, and if anything, he'll see some time, at cornerback.
Daryl Bullock asks, is he the fastest athlete so far in this recruiting class? Now, and let me preface this part. We talked to Nate McCullum a couple of weeks ago, and Nate, and I'm not stealing his quote, but he said he could take Tez Walker on occasion, maybe, and then he laughed. So how fast is Malcolm Ziglar? How true? What true speed is Malcolm Ziglar?
So he actually, I'm going to have to. It's probably better for you to pull this up, Tommy. But I mean, he's a legit track kid, and he let's see.
I don't want to mess up the duct tape and the pencil sticks.
And so he has put up some pretty impressive. All right, so I have it. I'm looking now. Let's see. Or hopefully it didn't get pulled out. Okay, so maybe it got pulled out. Yeah, so I'm not seeing it now. We had it in the one story. So I don't know off the top of my head. I know it was a sub 11 second 100-yard dash, which is pretty impressive in itself, but for a kid who's 6'2", 200 pounds, that's just absolutely mind-blowing. So he is legit speed. As far as the rest of the class, I'm trying to think in my head. I can't think of anybody who has speed that has been verified through track or a 40-yard dash that Evan says 10:76.
Well, look right here. Right. And then we have somebody chiming in and says he seems a bit slow on tape.
Yeah, so I think, to be honest, that was probably why certain schools kind of pulled away, because they were like, well, yes, great, he runs this track time, he has good size, I don't see it on tape, and so UNC is saying we'll pull that out of him. He has, he has the straight line speed, we'll pull that out of him, and so yeah. But I mean, from a right now, raw speed, I can't think of a guy who's committed to North Carolina that we can say is faster than him. Maybe I'm forgetting about somebody. Someone mentioned the comparable. Yeah, I wouldn't compare him to Connolly. Connolly was one of my all-time favorite recruits. Just an absolute monster. Go back and look at some of just his game highlights. He had that one game where he scored like 8 touchdowns, like 5 different ways or whatever it was. Connolly was an absolute monster and a freak of an athlete. Yeah, I wouldn't put that on Malcolm.
A little early for that. Yeah. Carolina 93, and we got to talk about this name. It's kind of like taking somebody's number. Carolina 93 has always been my gamer tag, actually. Don, of all the DB recruits, are they being told they could play any of the 3 positions, star, corner, or safety, or is that just specific to certain athletes?
So most of it is they're given like a primary position, and then in many, not all the instances, they're giving a secondary position. So in Malcolm's situation, they're saying safety. They've also mentioned a little bit of star. Take like Ty White. They're saying you're a star, but if that doesn't work out, we're going to play you at safety. Connolly is a cornerback who could potentially play star, sort of thing.
Tyler Woods, and this is the last question I see. So if you've got some questions for Don Callahan, you
because
need
I'm
to get them
probably
in.
going to have to shut off here before it dies on us.
Well, we're going to let you out because we don't need you running off stage having a heat stroke like a country singer did this
I'm
past
good
weekend.
now that I'm underneath the shade. To be honest, can you see me sweating? Is that the
Yeah, I
problem?
mean, we get the man a towel. Somebody said,
Oh
legit
man,
6'2"
I
frame.
have some water in the car with ice in it. I mean, I've been doing this a long time, so
Wait a
I
minute,
filled it up with ice with a little bit of water. It's going to be great when I get in my car.
you drove. You said it's 5 minutes from your house. You're burning gas and polluting the ozone.
Should I have walked?
Yeah, you should have walked over, got your steps in. Look, Tyler Woods compares him to maybe Deontay Williams, played at Carolina several
I
years
don't
ago.
mind that. I don't mind that too much. Yeah, I don't mind that too much of a comparison. I think that might not be a bad one. That's going back there. Some of the people who just started following recruiting recently probably can't recall back that. I mean, because that's like what 2000.
2010 Music City Bowl when he broke his leg, so it was before that. That was in the
Yeah,
heyday of the Butch era.
yeah. Well, and he actually committed to bunning.
So
So
he transitioned through there, and somebody
yeah,
said White Oak down in
yes, White
Jacksonville, if
Oak.
my memory serves.
Yep. And I actually spoke to him. We got reconnected on LinkedIn, and we were messaging back and forth. So he's actually living in Charlotte, doing some work there, which is pretty cool.
So interesting thing. You need to get him on the show, man. Have him come on the show.
All right, we'll have to.
A lot has gone on since that time when he was at Carolina. Don, anything left on the Ziglar commitment? Let me highlight your work. There's a Q&A up. There's a story up. Of course, the announcement was live, and you've got all sorts of other content on it through the recruiting on the Tar Pit Premium message board. So again, folks, if you're on here and you're not a Tar Pit Premium message board person, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, because it has been
we'll
hot.
have probably later this week. We'll have a little bit of background on the military welcoming home event that his family was a part of that UNC hosted 10 years ago.
That's pretty cool. Probably remember that. That's one of those tear-jerk moments where, they reunite families in Kenyon Stadium and everybody's crying and watching. That's cool. Can't wait for that story. Sort of an inside the commitment type story from Don Callahan. Don, last question for you. I'm gonna let you get out of there. That official visit weekend of June 23rd. Has Mac Brown and North Carolina staff had as successful weekend as that one has turned out to be for a recruiting class? Can you remember?
I have a terrible memory. I just know for this class that weekend has done pretty well for North Carolina. I think we have Staley, who ended up at Tennessee. I feel like there was someone else that might have ended up somewhere else, but all the rest of the guys so far have ended at North Carolina. Alex Taylor is obviously the big one that's out there. So is Javaris Green, who is about a month away from making his announcement. So I mean, it has worked out well for North Carolina. But one thing I'm kind of looking back and seeing that I'm noticing is a lot of these kids, whoever they visit last, whether look at Jalen Thompson, his last visit was to North Carolina the second week of June, and they shut it down. Kind of a good tell on where these kids are kind of leaning.
Great stuff from Don Callahan. I'm going to let you get out of here. We're going to keep this one short, 20 minutes only. I think you've lost about 5 pounds standing there. Don, the noon dish on Wednesday at noon should be pretty fun. What can you and I talk about on Wednesday that we haven't already talked about? Give me something.
I know.
We need a top 5.
That's why they pay you the big bucks to figure these sort of things out.
Well, we will get together and figure it out. Need a top 5. Might have top 5 hottest moments for Don Callahan on the recruiting trail. This one's up there.
This, to be honest, I think is more of a nervous thing. I'm just waiting for this. Oh, there it goes. Yeah, I'm going to have to. My computer just told me. All right. I will see you guys later. Tom, if you want to wrap it up, go for it.
I'll do it. This has been the Inside Carolina special live reaction with Don Callahan on location at Fuquay Arena High School for Malcolm Ziglar, 4-star safety commitment to North Carolina. Charlton Warren and Jason Jones doing work in the defensive back room. Ziglar is the latest. Stay tuned to Inside Carolina for all the complete coverage of football recruiting with Don traversing the state, covering everything. Of course, Sherelle, Sean, and Joey on the basketball side, the recruiting, and all the other content over at Inside Carolina. Stay there. And sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt. Rate, review, like this video, do all the good stuffs. We shall talk again soon. Thanks everybody for joining.